This is the Humans of Gaming podcast, an open and honest conversation about games, life, and belief.
Hey, this is Drew Dixon. I am the Chief Content Nerd at Love Thy Nerd and co-host of this podcast. And I'm joined with my co-host, Chris Gwaltney. Hey, Chris.
Hey, welcome to Humans of Gaming, where we ask humans about their humanity and their games.
Yeah.
How'd I do?
It's pretty good.
All right.
It's if that's going to be like a tagline for the podcast, we need to work on it a little bit.
Come on, that was like raw and vulnerable and real.
Yeah. Well,
all right, better luck next time.
That was okay.
I'll try next time.
You doing all right today?
Yeah, man, I'm good. Bought some games. I started playing Nier Automata. How do you say it?
Automata is what I say, but I have no idea if that's right.
Yeah. So I actually bought and played it like a year and a half ago, and it just didn't click with me. Like 7 hours or something. It just didn't click. So I took it back.
Yeah, me too. I did the same thing. I didn't take it back, but
for some reason I've just been thinking like, man, I want to try that again. So here we go.
It's like, there's some people that love that game. Like, it's dearly loved by a certain like subset of gamers.
Right.
I think it's really well made in many ways. I don't necessarily get it either, but I didn't get far enough to like really get into it. So I'm determined to eventually go back and like plow through it and see if it like clicks with me, you know?
Yeah. Well,
so you have to let me know.
I'll let you know.
And you said you got Dark Souls 2, so.
Yeah, I'm going to play through that with my boy Ryan. We just finished Divinity Original Sin 2, which is a literal masterpiece. I mean, like, so good. I mean, top five of all time for me, easily.
Wow.
Yeah,
those are strong words.
It's way good. So anyway,
well,
him and
I have to.
Dark Souls.
I may have to get Dark Souls 2 and play through it with you as well, because you helped me quite a bit through Dark Souls 3, so I think that could be fun. I've heard people really mixed about Dark Souls 2. Like, some people say it's the worst of the Dark Souls game, which I think probably means it's still really great. But
it's basically it's the Last Jedi of the Dark Souls series.
Yeah.
Like, it's just really polarizing, you know?
Yeah, right. Well, we should introduce our guests, because they made a game that's really great, and I think probably has some inspiration from Dark Souls, which we just talked about. So our special guests this week are Derek and Mike, Derek Bradley and Mike Vermeulen. Did I say your name right, Mike?
Oh, it's close enough.
You say it for me.
Vermeulen.
Vermeulen.
Yeah,
that sounds like a German name. Is that German?
It's South African.
It is.
Dutch, so it might as well be German.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so Derek, Mike, how are you guys doing?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Yeah, all fine here.
Yeah, and so you guys are with Aurora 44.
A44 actually, as we recently
A44. Oh, okay. So now it's just called A44, huh?
Yeah, pretty much. It's just kind of like it fits into like so many more formats a lot more easily, I guess. You know, it just matches up with our logo.
Yeah. So, we were just talking about Dark Souls. Am I right in saying that you guys were influenced by that game, I would assume?
Yeah, we can confirm that we have definitely played Dark Souls.
Yeah.
Great. Good podcast. We'll see you.
All right, which Dark Souls is your favorite?
Or Souls game, I guess.
Or Souls game,
yeah,
because there's a lot.
There too.
It's tough. It's between 1 and 3 for me personally. I'm not too sure which one.
I would certainly pick Bloodborne as the Souls genre game of preference, other than Ashen, of course.
Right.
I'd probably have to say 3 if I wanted to play it tomorrow. 1 if I just had to play one once in my life, you know?
Right.
That's
Now
a
notice
complicated-
neither of them said anything about Dark Souls 2, so I think we've proved the point.
Yeah.
I can confirm also that we have developers in our studio who think that Dark Souls 2 is the best of the bunch.
We
So-
just don't bring it up.
Yeah.
right.
I feel like that's how The Last Jedi is now. It's like now the 3 things that you don't talk about are politics, religion, and The Last Jedi.
That's right. Yeah. Although I kind of love to talk about it and just like see if it makes people mad.
I'm into it, man. I hated The Last Jedi. I mean, I think I talked to you about it, Drew. Like, I was pissed when I first saw The Last Jedi. And then after I got off my high horse and went and saw it again, I'm like, I love it.
That's a great story to me. It's a good redemption story because
Yeah.
there's so many people that I think just won't admit it's great.
Where are you guys at, Derek and
So-
Mike, on The Last Jedi?
I liked it. Like I guess I'm just not that hugely emotionally invested in like what it has to be, you know. So I just kind of go along, see a movie that was kind of fun to watch, and I'm kind of happy with that, you know. Personally,
Yeah, pretty much the same. You know, it's fine. It's fine.
You guys are way too easygoing. I was hoping we could pick a fight, but man,
yeah, yeah.
It's a clear way. We don't.
the world would be a better place if we had more Derek's and Mike's.
You know, we live in New Zealand, man. There's like there's rolling green hills, and
Right.
we got orcas in the harbor once in a while around here.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys live in like one of the most beautiful places on earth, so
Yeah.
you can't like get too upset about anything, I guess.
Yeah. I think we're pretty lucky here, far away from most things, and you know, like Derek says, is we look outside and there's just mountain ranges and blue skies at the moment. So
Yeah, that's nice.
we're pretty chill most of the time.
That's cool. Well, we kind of hinted at this already, but yeah, tell us, like, for our listeners who haven't played Ashen, give us like the quick pitch, what it's about and what makes it unique.
All right. Derek's nodding and pointing to me to take this one. So my usual spiel. So Ashen is an action game that features stamina-based combat. It's also open world and has passive multiplayer as a kind of way to set itself apart to ease people into the genre and to allow people to play together. So the game itself is about kind of waking up in this world deprived of light. It's completely dark, and suddenly the light returns to this world, and so you go out and kind of learn the story of the world, and eventually try and find the source of this light.
Yeah. And so when you say passive multiplayer, there will be some of our listeners that don't know what that means. It's sort of like Journey, right? Like you'll be randomly connected with another player, and sometimes you'll just kind of come upon each other like you would in Journey.
So passive multiplayer, the way we approached it is we really wanted to give players the opportunity to play together, even though they might not always kind of like actively pursue that, I suppose.
Right.
You're running around the world and you might come across another player, you might play together with them, you might go your separate ways, and that's one of the core, I guess, mantras of the game is really to build relationships with these other players, whether that's actively playing together, helping each other out, or even going kind of your separate ways. So sure there's meaning in that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and to me, I think the game really incentivizes you to play together. Like, and obviously, like, you guys also put into the game, if you're for whatever reason, if you're not able to connect with another player, the game will connect you with an NPC companion an AI companion that will go along with you. But I found myself like really whenever I'm playing with a real player, with another real player, like I just stick by that person like so closely, constantly, because I think you guys did a great job of designing it from the ground up to be best played in that kind of like co-op setting. I mean, I'm sure that was intentional, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We don't really want players to just feel alone in this big world.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, even if you don't enjoy the company of another player, you won't really find yourself alone. We have what you mentioned, an AI that stands in for another player, but we've seen anecdotally from people playing that. Pretty much, like you said, kind of the moment they run into another player and realize it is another player, um, that those people stick together as long as possible and help each other out. And I think for what we set out to do, that's exactly kind of the result we wanted to see. People
Mm-hmm.
collaborating in a stamina based combat setting.
It's kind of interesting, I suppose, like watching the community response to Ashen, and I suppose if you want to call it like the difficulty curve that occurs throughout Ashen, where you're playing with somebody else. So I suppose like if you were to compare it to say Dark Souls 1, playing with someone else is significantly easier than playing with playing by yourself. And the game is almost unbalanced when you play with someone else, like particularly the outer world, like where you're playing against normal enemies, like bosses are a bit more balanced. I believe because Dark Souls has things like health scaling on their bosses and whatever to make them a bit more in line with two players when you do hop in. Whereas the whole of Ashen is balanced for two players.
Yeah.
So if you go by yourself, it's a little bit harder. But it also means
a lot harder,
yeah,
in my opinion.
yeah, it's a lot harder, but it's quite interesting.
Just triggered Drew.
Some of the response we get particularly from people who are very hardcore into the genre in general and might have played like all of the other stamina-based combat games is like, oh, it's easier than the others. But then they hit the dungeons and the first dungeon's a bit of a challenge, and then they hit the second dungeon and they're like, wow, okay, this is like a serious challenge. Like this lines up with the other games in the genre. Even when you have two players together, it's challenging. And for us, it's quite interesting to watch how players react to that, how they kind of play through it, because on purpose we wanted it to make a game where more players can enjoy it. And so what I found, at least when I started playing this sort of game, was I would play it for 2 days and then just kind of maybe get too frustrated and have to take about a week off and then play it for another 2 days.
Yeah.
So we've essentially engineered that through the game in a lot of ways through multiplayer, because there's someone who can help you out with these sorts of things. But also when you hit a dungeon, it's like the dungeons give you like a little taste of that brutality, with the bosses being the culmination of that. And then you get released again into the outer world where it's more about you exploring with people for a little while. It's like a palate cleanser. You get to the difficulty is generally ramping up, but it's nowhere near as tight or as grueling as a dungeon. And then you hit another dungeon together. So you've kind of built up a bit of your own personal stamina, and you're like ready to tackle this again with another person and like stick more tightly to another person when you're in a dungeon. But when you're in the outer world, just like Mike was saying, like some of the interesting stuff is just seeing someone else run along the horizon and kind of let them go, and you're going your own way or whatever it might be. It's like you're not necessarily on that knife edge out in the outer world, which is really cool. Because when you put out a game, you don't necessarily know how people are going to experience it, but we found that it's kind of gone exactly to plan, which is quite amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I've kind of gotten to where I love these types of games. I recently played through Bloodborne, and then immediately after that I played through Dark Souls 3. And so those were kind of my first Souls-like games, and I just that type of game just immediately clicked with me, and the risk reward of them and the high stakes sort of emergent situations that arise out of your play are something I just really dig. But what was amazing to me about playing Ashen is how you guys managed to breathe some new life into this genre and create some really unique, I think, immersion experiences. It's like some that have been meaningful to me are like when you're in, because you talked about how the dungeons are significantly harder. And so like when you get separated accidentally from your companion in the dungeon, it's like the most nerve-wracking thing. You're like, I gotta figure out like how to, like you'll accidentally fall off a ledge or get knocked off a ledge and you don't die, but your companion is up somewhere else and it's dark and you're having to use your lantern and you're like, I don't know how to get back to them. Those make for some great moments. And also I love the revival system. Like you can revive you and your teammate can both revive the other one once, or you can be revived once, right? Is how it works.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. And so like if you get knocked down and you're waiting to be revived, just like watching your teammate like take on a big slew of enemies, you're just like praying that they get back to you, is a pretty great like moment that I was surprised at how like because usually when you're watching, like when you were waiting to be revived, like it's not quite as intense, but I don't know. I was just always on the edge of my seat whenever that would happen. Especially if I hadn't gotten back to, if I had lost a whole bunch of, I forget what you call it. What do you call souls in this game? It's not souls, obviously, but,
Scoria.
Yeah, Scoria, right. Especially if I was like having a whole bunch of Scoria that I needed to get to that I was going to lose, and I'm just like, oh, please come like, revive me.
Yeah, I did think like Revival seems so like it fits the genre perfectly. I would say where in a lot of things it's like say like in a Diablo type game, like you're inherently more powerful than most of the enemies that you're fighting. So when you do die, like a mishap, or you kind of ran out of health potions, or whatever the case might be, and like your buddy more or less like cleans everything up and would revive you in that sort of dynamic. But with this, because like 3 hits and your buddy might be dead, it's like right on the knife edge constantly, and that's what like one of the hallmarks of the genre is that you're not really stronger than anything else, you're just more clever than anything else, is how you have to get through. And that just puts that whole like waiting for somebody else is like it seems like it fits perfectly. And I mean for us, I guess in some of the other games in the genre though couldn't necessarily do it because maybe the game isn't as focused on specifically PvE. But for us in a PvE setting, it was just like a very clear path forward. And one of those ways that we kind of introduce emergent ways for players to like kind of fix up their own difficulty curves when things are too hard. Where just understanding those mechanics can make the game a lot more bright.
Yeah. Another thing I was going to say, like the moments when you do lose your teammate, your partner, those can provide for some really epic moments, because you can use the bones, I forget what you call it, and teleport out if you want, back to the hub world. What do you call those?
The Craven Remnants.
The Craven Remnants. I never pay attention to the titles of things. I just know what they do. But you probably get that a lot. But anyway. Yeah, so you could do that if you wanted to, but like you're gonna have to fight off some enemies to like get that out and do it. But if you want to go on and press in further into the dungeon, like it feels incredibly heroic to get, to me personally, like to go through, like to delve deeper into the dungeon on my own. And so if you're able to pull that off, like there's a real thrill of accomplishment that comes from that, which is unique because the whole thing's been built for like to be a lot safer to explore with 2 people.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, the way we think about, I guess, story in our games is mostly like what you just described, where it's like you're trying to engineer the potential for players to create their own emergent story, and a lot of that ends up being, it's not about like necessarily like the fanciest writing or like things that are like rigid and set in your story. It's about like what's the story when a player's buddy dies and they're halfway down a dungeon, you know. So
Yeah.
like the story could end up being like a tragic tale where your buddy dies and then you like try go further and die too. The story otherwise could be like your buddy died like right next to the end of it, or like the two of you got through it together, or you were struggling and your buddy kind of like pulled you through, you know. And so like all of those are just like emergent devices that we try to bring in. And I suppose the way that we look at it is, and I think like inherently in games, it's about dialogue with the player, not necessarily about like an enforced rigid structure around the player. And it's like guessing, you know, 3 moves ahead of what someone could need or be able to make use of and iterate with, you know. And I think those are the most important stories like interactive media like games could tell.
Right. And those are the most memorable stories too, you know? Like I think the story that you're a part of versus, you know, the story that's being told to you. I mean, it makes me think, you know, I mentioned earlier like playing through Divinity Original Sin with my friend Ryan, and like, you know, we still laugh about just some of these ridiculous hijinks that we got ourselves into. And it had nothing to do with like the story that was being told in the game. It had to do with whatever stupid thing we were doing. And that's so cool. And I imagine that is so much harder to design for. Like you said, you know, trying to guess 3 steps ahead or, you know, create those spaces for those stories to happen, I imagine is not easy.
Yeah, I think it's almost just like a paradigm shift, you know, where I know we almost like look at a lot of things that are designed around us now, and it's like, oh, this thing was not designed with like dialogue. I think we were looking at my pants today. we're like, this cell phone just does not fit in this pocket like very like well, you know, like you're gonna lose this as soon as you sit down in the car or something. And it's like these guys did not engage in dialogue with their consumer. You know, you gotta like design them, make sure they look good, then put them on and do some things with them and think like 3 steps ahead, you know? And I think as soon as you do that, the solutions are actually really simple because it just becomes a matter of dialogue as a matter, instead of like a matter of like giving a well-crafted speech, I suppose, is more like the rigid approach. And like dialogue is like, it's like an organic thing and it's something as humans we do every day, but it is still a little bit like stepping out on a limb because you don't really know what people are going to do when you actually release it. You know? So it's a little bit more unknown, whereas like a rigid thing, you can go like, oh yeah, no, 3x structure, we got this thing, we did these things, you can read it all out, you can send it to people and they can like, everyone's looking at the same thing and evaluating whether it's good. But those kind of like emergent devices are a little bit trickier in that they exist in the moment, you know?
Yeah, and maybe to add on that, like in the case of Ashen, what we really looked for is not so much like Derek mentioned, the rigid structure, do this, do that, but more giving players, I guess, a couple of options to then go and explore the world themselves. And even developers in the studio would use these tools. So say our cooperative kind of climbing system. Once we got that in, and the whole studio was playing the game and just exploring the world, they would very quickly start doing their own crazy things. Like we had a whole group of developers make this kind of Ashen climbing club to try and climb up on the high structure in the world. And
of course,
and that's just because we gave out tools to our players to say, hey, this is your toolkit. Go out and explore the world how you want, rather than be stuck on rails.
Right.
Yeah.
It makes me think of Breath of the Wild and like some of the absolute ridiculous videos that people just do these insane, you know, like what are those called? Rube Goldberg, you know, like the thing where it's like they do that stuff in Breath of the Wild and it's just like, I love that, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of that whole kind of idea of having dialogue with your player, right? You don't. I mean, we see like a bunch of gameplay videos coming in with players breaking our game and falling through the wall, cheating their way through some secret passageway that they might have found. And
there was someone who skipped the second boss, right?
Yeah, there was someone who skipped the second boss, but we went ahead and made sure the game wouldn't break. If that we didn't know if it was possible, we didn't think it was possible.
Yeah, there's a very convoluted path you can take, like and like somehow just catch on ledges and stuff and like climb over his whole arena and make it to the next bit. And it's pretty interesting. It's
the
very...
internet will find a way every time.
Yeah, and I think that's
Every
great, and
single
that's
time.
us having dialogue with the player and saying like, yeah, sure, go ahead and do this. It's your story.
Because like, yeah, I mean, for to that degree, exactly what Mike's saying there. Like, we still build the game where we're like, someone might be able to do this. So if you do that, like, you know, the whole game structure doesn't break. Like, you know, there's somebody waiting at the next dungeon to make sure that you have the quest to go into that dungeon, all that kind of stuff. And that's because it's generally encouraged, and it's like a perspective that we have that it's okay for players to make their own way through the world. Like, I guess that person's like crafted their own adventure quite dramatically, but yeah.
Well, I was gonna, maybe that's the one, but I was gonna ask, what's the most surprising thing you've heard, like, that players have done with your game that you wouldn't have expected?
Well, that's mine, but
I think I think that one was great, because essentially what that does is it allows you to unlock, well, it unlocks fast travel for you, so the rest of the game you have to go through without fast travel. I think for me the most crazy thing was a player playing in our Children of Cisna mode, which I won't spoil, but going through the game in that mode without taking a hit of damage.
Oh yeah, the zero hit run.
Zero hit run throughout the entire game.
Gosh.
Which to us is just that is some extreme skill.
I am so bad at video games. Like that just, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I've been playing, have you guys played Dead Cells?
Yep.
Yeah, it's been on my list.
So there's this cool system in there, I think it's cool, that there's these cursed chests, like cursed treasure chests that you can open. But if you open it, like, you're gonna get some great treasure, but like, you know, upgrades and weapons and things. But if you do, you have to kill 10 enemies without taking a single hit of damage, or you're dead.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's a really cool, like, I just appreciate, it's one of those things that changes the flow of your play. And so whenever I do those, it's always like this, just like super careful, and you're just like completely zoned in on making sure you don't make any mistakes.
So basically those developers looked at a mimic from Dark Souls and they're like, hey, how could we make this worse?
Yeah, that's kind of what it is. You don't have to fight anything, you don't have to fight the chest anyway.
Well, yeah, but you've got to fight 10 things.
Yeah,
right?
you got to kill. You got to kill 10 enemies
and not get hit.
Yeah, you got, so in the later levels, especially when you're playing some pretty gnarly enemies, it's intense.
So I have a question, guys. Do you get like annoyed or bummed or sad if and when people continually reference Dark Souls when they talk about your game?
I think we've got like two perspectives on that. Like, first of all, like, being compared to Dark Souls in any way is pretty amazing, actually. It's an amazing game, so I don't think that's bad. I think the other thing is, though, and it's actually really interesting, and something we're a part of, is I think where stamina-based combat started and what it does, the sort of genre, so to speak, I think is still getting built. Where right now, anything that has essentially a stamina bar will be considered derivative of Dark Souls, and almost even anything that was tough at some point was referenced.
Right. Sure.
Like, if anything was difficult, like difficult fishing game, the Souls
of fishing game.
of fishing game.
Souls fishing.
But,
Yeah.
but I think at some point, like, it's actually quite interesting, because I think the genre will be born from it, and those rules, so to speak, are still getting set, and it's kind of like what was the first person shooter? Was it like, I don't know if it was Doom.
Was it Wolfenstein?
Yes, it was Wolfenstein.
Yeah.
Then, like, you know, that comes out and everything would be a Wolfenstein clone for like 10 years after it, you know. And I guess what we need to see is like some other standout things that do different stuff. And for us, it's really interesting. We feel like we're a part of something quite big that's happening. And, you know, our challenge is to continually question what it means to be in that genre. Does it mean that you have a stamina bar? Does it mean that your combat is on the knife edge? You know, you get hit a couple of times and you're dead, as opposed to 20 times and you're dead, like,
Right.
and figuring that stuff out is interesting. Yeah, but I don't think that we're bothered by it in any way, to be completely honest.
No, it's exactly like Derek says. It's quite humbling to know that we can kind of compare ourselves on that level and see where we stand with our take on it. And I think it helps push the genre forward, just seeing more and more games take on, I guess, the stamina based combat rule set, and just
Yeah.
evolving that genre.
So you guys are actually the first people I've ever heard use this stamina-based combat term. I've never heard that before. Because like,
I guess
surely we can't just keep calling the genre Souls-like. Like we need something better than that, maybe. So like, did you guys come up with that, or you heard that from somewhere else?
I don't actually know. That's a good question. Because I mean, like, is it the stamina that defines the genre? Maybe.
I guess it's a core part of the genre, and it leads into the difficulty and all that
Yeah.
stuff. I'm not sure. I don't know if we came up with it. We just started using it at some point.
It's like something that we say so much within the studio, and there's like 40 of us, in the studio, for example. It's like, but by the point you have like that much community around you using a term, I don't actually know where it came.
I think you guys
Yeah.
came up. Let's just call it. You guys came up with it. This will be the debut right here, world premiere of the genre stamina-based combat.
I mean, like
you go.
Metroidvania still has Metroid in it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like, I think names are powerful though, and so depending on what it is, will kind of influence it forever. Whether it's good to have it Souls-like, I mean, they did come up with it,
So that's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
the Metroidvania. Yeah, that's true. That's
Yeah.
two different games, right? Metroid and Castlevania.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that we're gonna see some more because Ashen's really great, and so I think we're gonna see some other people make some Souls-like games that have passive multiplayer.
Sure.
So maybe when those games come out, we can call those Ashen-likes.
Souls Ashen like.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, well, exactly. So like calling it Souls-like, I think is the same as saying like Metroidvania, and saying stamina-based combat. It's kind of like the same as saying first-person shooter, where you like boil it down to some convention, and anything that shoots that shoots from a first-person angle is a first-person shooter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really know. At some point, it kind of it melds into one thing anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I did want to talk because we talked about this a little bit earlier before we started the recording. And I think, the story that emerges out of your individual play of Ashen is what makes it special, I think. But there's also, I've seen a lot of people actually talking about how nice it is to see the world of the game kind of come back together. So I do think there's some really nice kind of story touches that you guys put into the game, because like Bloodborne and Dark Souls, I think both those games, even though you're progressing, you never really feel like you're making the world a better place in those games. They're pretty oppressive experiences, and even though you feel good about the successes that you're having in the game, you never really feel like I don't know, like there's not a whole lot of hope in those games. But this is a very hopeful game. Like I think there's a lot of it just feels really good to sort of be building something from the ashes, as it were. Where did that come from? Did you guys want to make a game that felt more hopeful compared to some of these other games that maybe inspired it?
Yeah, I think and this is pretty much thinking on the spot as to the darker. If I take Dark Souls 1, maybe is more about breaking relationships than it is about building them. Because you're in sort of the Soul series, you're kind of hunting the Lords of Cinder, or you're trying to kill Gwyn, Lord of Cinder. It's kind of ending something. And at the very start, we wanted to make like the principle that we had, I suppose, and you kind of come up with these pillars as guiding lights in your development, so that 3 years down the line, when you've been working on it for 3 years, you don't just suddenly have a different other weird idea and start making something else. You almost need them to keep your sanity. And one of them for us was forging relationships was key.
Hmm.
And so if you go down the line of like, oh, we want to take the path to the left or the path to the right on our like story progression, which one lines up with forging relationships? And in general, it'll be the one of like, you're building something together. So like you're building a town together, or you're building a community, or you're helping rebuild the world, I guess, is what it ends up being. That it actually originated from something quite small, which was the multiplayer paradigm of like, I think even to take an extra step back, we started off with the idea of how do we make NPCs come to life, right? Like they're kind of these like tools for quests in other games, and we wanted to make them come to life a bit more. So it was like, okay, they can give you quests in the town, but we want them to run out and like help you with these quests. We don't want them to be these kind of like lazy NPCs that hang around town and like wait for you to do their bidding. Then we've got them coming along with you. And then so we sort of formulated this formula this idea of forging relationships, and everything, including the story and the world, and how much light is in the world and all that kind of stuff, very much all kind of formed around that, which is why I suppose like if I were to backward engineer in relation to like the darker Souls-like games, is that those are often about dismantling something, where forging relationships inherently kind of put us on a course to bringing something together, building up, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Like it's literally like a core value system, like we just, if I'm thinking and comparing it to like Love Thy Nerd, this thing that we started a year ago, like one of the first things we did was come up with, we actually call them pillars as well. And it's like this core value or these things that you want to drive towards. And I've never heard anybody like developers talk about that in terms of making a game. And I think that's just like a really good way to do things. Were there other like pillars like that, or was that kind of the main one?
That was certainly the main one. I mean, the other ones got quite like technical, where we knew we wanted to do like stamina-based combat, for example. So it's like get that stuff really tight, make sure that we delve really deeply into it. We knew we wanted passive, like exactly what Mike kind of rattled off before, where it's like open world, passive multiplayer, stamina-based combat, and those three things get a bit more technical. I think when we get into that one like guiding concept, if you have too many, then you kind of it muddies the direction. Where I think for a lot of media, like games in particular, are kind of make and break based, I think, on like the convergence of a lot of disciplines, because there's so many that go into making a game, that getting everybody to converge on one vision is extremely key, whether it be the name of the project, the central pillar of the project, whatever it might be. And I imagine it's actually the same for you guys, where you want this kind of cohesive thing. So all these different inspirations that are coming in on their own stand as like valid things, but the way to make them more than the sum of their whole is to make them converge. And when they converge, they do more than what they do alone,
Yeah, definitely. That's cool. That's cool. Well, I've really enjoyed playing it. Would definitely encourage our listeners to go check it out. What's the response been like to the game? I mean, I know it hasn't been out very long, like what, 2 or 3 months now, I guess?
Yeah.
Something
So
like
we officially shipped in December. So I mean, the response has been great. I think walking through the studio still today, we just have people on their one monitor might have a stream open and just kind of looking at responses from players live, and reviews have been really good. We've had a lot of players kind of we've had really nice messages come in from the community to kind of our any of our email addresses. Really, it's been just it took us by surprise how well it was received. I mean, we obviously worked for many years on this game, and when you're so deep into it, it's sometimes hard to take a step back. And there were certainly moments in the project where we did that, but nothing kind of prepares you for that launch. You never really know how it will go. And for us, it's been just really amazing to see how well it has been received by people. And yeah, that's just great. I mean, it's very motivating to know that we make the right choices along the way, we focus on the right things, and that our core values have come through in the game in the end. And so yeah, it's been wonderful.
Yeah, and I think like it's the type of game that I think can appeal to a pretty wide range of people too, because if you're really into like Souls-like games, you're gonna dig this. But also there's like the rebuilding the world, the way that works, and there's some really there's some interesting lore that's pretty unique, I think, to the game as well. That I think people who are into sort of more thoughtful or philosophical type games will also dig this. So I think you guys did a great job of kind of appealing to a lot of different types of gamers as well, which I found surprising. Or if people, if you just really like co-op, like this is going to be a super unique co-op experience for you.
Yeah, so that's something we set out to do. We obviously have stamina-based content in the game. We know there's a pretty steep kind of learning curve for that sort of combat system. And so we try to make it as accessible for people coming from other genres as well, to really kind of get lost in our world. And I mean the reaction to even the lore of the world has been really good. So I think we're all very proud of the studio that we managed to bring in so many players who might never have played even a Souls-like game.
I guess the general principle is that, yeah, if you play like, I suppose what you would call like vanilla Ashen, and you embrace multiplayer, and like kind of the whole co-op aspect, you'll probably go through the game and it'll be like there'll be a couple of little tough bits like in the dungeons and stuff, but you'll go through pretty smoothly. But on the other hand, if you play it once, say, and you want to do like our equivalent of New Game Plus, I guess, I would say it's harder than Dark Souls New Game Plus.
Yeah.
If you go that route, because I would say like our New Game Plus / hardcore Dark Souls route is probably more like trying to solo the game, and doing our New Game Plus is significantly harder than that. So the whole point, like even when we say accessibility, I guess it's actually trying to, like, it doesn't mean like dumbing the game down necessarily. It actually means like even your most hardcore player should be challenged by this thing, and also your newest player should be challenged but not bounce off of like just something that's completely unrealistic for them to pick up in a time that would be fun for them. There's like a lot of thought that's gone into like just catering the game to a whole bunch of different play styles and experience levels.
So right now the game is available for Xbox, PC. I will be praying and fasting and holding candlelight vigils daily until I can play it on PlayStation and or Switch. So if anybody else wants to join me, just let me know.
That isn't something that we've announced just yet, but we'll be sure to. Yours will be like the first email we send. It's coming.
I appreciate it. Because I'm going to be real hungry, because I'll be fasting forever until it happens.
Well, we do like to ask kind of some more personal questions on this podcast. We've already talked for over 40 minutes about the game, but yeah. So you guys, now Derek, you grew up in New Zealand, is that right?
I'm actually originally from South Africa myself.
Oh, are you? Okay.
No relation to Mike here, who has also lived in South Africa. It just happens to be that way. And I've lived in New Zealand, I'd say half my life now, a little bit over half.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, now that you say it, now of course I hear the South African accent a little bit, but I feel like I could hear the South African in Mike's voice more.
I think my accent's a lot stronger. My accent's a bit weird though. I don't think a lot of people would place it.
Yeah. Mike, you lived in like, was it like Spain and Belgium?
Yeah, I grew up in Belgium. I was only in South Africa until I was about 7 or so, but I've lived in Belgium, Spain, Germany, now New Zealand. So
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, you're all over the map.
yeah, I have been.
Which was the best place that you lived?
Certainly New Zealand. Other places I was always looking for. Okay, where's the next adventure? And
Hmm.
New Zealand is the adventure.
The diplomatic answer.
Yeah, I'm here on a work visa, so
Yeah,
there's
the
certain
Prime Minister's
well,
listening.
no, I really love New Zealand. It's a beautiful place, and yeah, it's just if you have an
Hmm.
opportunity to visit, definitely do
Well, now we have some people to stay with, so
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll just come to your guys' house and play Ashen.
There you go. So did we kind of like to hear like what drives people, what their background is. Did you guys grow up like in a church or anything? Was religion a part of your upbringing?
Mine not hugely. South Africa tends to be a fairly like religious place, and so like a little bit when I was a kid, I guess.
Yeah.
But not so much in New Zealand. I think like value system though, like in general, I think to be able to run a company, do all that sort of stuff, you got to genuinely want to look after people. I think,
Right.
and I think yeah, a lot of your upbringing leads towards that. I suppose is trying to be a good person, trying to turn up to a place that you actually want to work at every day.
Hmm.
I think is the most important thing that I do
Yeah.
these days, and it's yeah, to find a group of passionate people that you want to work with, genuinely look after them, and kind of do that stuff is kind of what your upbringing leads
Did
to. It's
so
hard.
your parents kind of instilled that in you, you'd say?
I would say so. Yeah. It's so hard to know what influences it is. Like I think a human is so complex as to how these things are put together. Like I feel like the
Oh
people
yeah.
that I work with every day right now instill it in me. Like reinforce it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and part of it is like being able to craft a studio of people that you want to look after as well. Like
Yeah.
There's some people that are easier to look after than others.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
I guess that shouldn't be a cop out necessarily, but how many people are in your guys' like how many people are on the team?
40. Yeah. So team of 40. And again, like from a whole diverse bunch of backgrounds and stuff like that. Where yeah, it's interesting. It's a really unique challenge, and I think it broadens your it broadens your horizons a lot. It makes you like it's almost like how people with kids say they kind of like they stand off certain edges. I think like running a company stands off certain edges because you kind of become more accepting of more things. I guess it's like how like I don't know, parents are okay with their kid throwing up on them, or they're okay with certain things which you're not normally okay with in everyday
Dude,
life. Like
I am not a parent yet, but I have such an aversion to drool.
Yeah.
And like when I see parents that are just like wiping it off with their hand and just licking it to get rid of it, I'm like, I
Who would
can't.
lick it?
I'm exaggerating, but like
Okay.
I see that and I'm like,
Yeah.
sorry,
It's
you
like
triggered me.
you get like and parenting's probably a good example though, and I think that's the same thing where it's like you genuinely want to look after a group of people, and you prioritize whether it's like, is this thing more important right now, like something that maybe before I ran a company I would have been worried about, or is it more important to look after this group of people? Yeah, so it changes you for sure, but as I say, it's reciprocal. Like folks in the company, like I mean, game developers in general are super passionate about what they do, and like that level of energy is returned as well. So it's a really good place to be in. It's very positive.
I love the simplicity of that. Like just look after people. I think that's just beautiful.
Yeah. Well, Mike, you're here with Derek, and he's talking about how he tries. Do you feel looked
How's he doing?
after?
How's he doing?
Yeah, like joining A44 was like a great kind of thing for me because I've been kind of all over the place, both in AAA, so in large studios, worked as an indie, worked as a lecturer, and then returning to games um, here at A44, and it's been a really supportive environment, and I think that's something like I've always felt, and I've always felt that was kind of core to the studio. Because the people we have here, it's probably the best team I've ever worked in terms of people getting
Hmm.
along. Even as we grew over the last kind of 2 years to 40 now, people are really close in the studio. Um, People like get along really well, and I think that's because from the top, it's kind of the idea is to treat people with respect, collaborate, and take care of each other. And I mean, like if when new employees join from overseas, for instance, um, everyone in the studio jumps to kind of help them out, whether that's driving them around to go to house viewings or give
Mhm.
references so that they can actually rent a place or give suggestions. And that's something that's I think really unique
Hmm.
here at the studio that I haven't experienced anywhere else. And I think it's a little bit the Kiwi way as well. Kiwis are very open and
Mhm.
friendly, and you walk around the street, like just around your neighborhood, and someone you never knew might just say hi and ask how your day was. And I mean, that's kind of a nice thing, especially for me, having moved previously from Germany, where everything's very strict and staccato, and people are lovely,
Yeah.
people are nice, but people, I guess, are a lot more. It's a bit of a different culture, and it's not to say it's bad. It like really, like Derek says, it really opens up your horizons to like other things and other experiences. But at the same time, coming to New Zealand and feeling that kind of support all around you is it's really great, and it lets you be creative. That's amazing for games. It doesn't kind of stop you in that sense. It really kind of encourages you to be creative, and to go out and do and take care of other people as well, and be a nice person, a good person around you.
So what about you, Mike? Did you grow up going to church or anything, or what was your upbringing?
I'd say when I was really young, again, just like Derek, growing up in South Africa, my family's religious. Moving to Belgium, living in kind of Catholic countries, so I suppose I had somewhat of a religious
Yeah,
upbringing, although I'm not religious myself. Um,
yeah,
but I guess what I like my upbringing was much like Derek's, a lot about taking care of people. My family's really close. It's not a very like we're not a very big family.
mm-hmm.
My parents in particular are the reason that I got opportunities to travel, to see different places in the world, live in different
Yeah,
places, go to different schools growing up as a teenager. I'm sure I was a nightmare for them, but looking
All
back at it,
teenagers are.
I learned a lot from it, and I think that support is something that I I've always kind
mm.
of tried to give to other people as well, whether that's game developers or just any kind of support people need. I try and be there for them and kind of push on to them I guess the values that my parents and my family kind of put on me, which was a lot about support and and treating people with respect. Especially, I mean, growing up in South Africa uh, can be quite rough, and for us moving out of South Africa very young, me and my siblings, it kind of made us look at what we knew from when we were kids and kind of say, okay, hey, like it is really important that in this kind of world, and we need to support each other and I guess be be the best kind of people we can possibly be.
I think it's really interesting to me to hear you guys, this mantra keep coming of like taking care of people, taking care of people, taking care of people. And then to hear about the kind of game that you made, which is, having a partner and taking care of that person so that you don't die horribly in a dungeon.
Yep.
But like that theme is there. And I think to hear that is maybe grown out of you guys is cool.
to be fair, it is actually a little like game development is the Dark Souls of of jobs. Because I mean,
That's
at the end of the
right.
day,
That's the quote right there.
yeah, it's a hit driven industry, right? So
Uh-huh.
yeah, like actually that analogy is pretty good because we look after each other, but like it's fairly high risk. It requires a lot of you in
Mm-hmm.
general, like and by that I don't mean like working long hours or anything like that. I mean like cerebrally, like you've got to come to work
Right.
like wanting to absolutely kill it every day, and like if you don't, essentially you just ship a bad game. and then
hmm
and the
Yeah.
studio closes. That's kind of
Right.
it's kind of how
Yeah.
game dev works if you want to oversimplify it.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like running a sports team than it is running a conventional business in some senses.
Yeah.
In that when you do ship and that kind of uncertain moment of like what's going to happen now comes along,
Mm-hmm.
it's like game night.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, like when you released I'm sure like when you released the game a couple months ago, you're sitting there going like, all right, are people gonna love it, or like am I gonna have to shut the studio down?
yeah, I mean,
like you're
we were happy with it, and I think, but even
right.
so, it was still like I remember like when we were at the Game Awards and we had because like there was an embargo on reviews, so we hadn't seen what the scores were going to be yet or anything like that. And coming out of it, I'm like, look, as long as we get sixes, we're above a 5. It's above 50%. Happy with it. And like the first one that comes out was like GameSpot or something, right? It was like 9 out of 10. I'm like, surely it's a bug. Refresh. Surely it's a bug. This
They
could
meant to
not.
type a 6. They were dyslexic or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, I'm just like, where's the sixes? All right, and then we kept. I think we sort of averaged like 8.5 from like all the big reviewers. So we got like 8s, 8.5s, 9s, and like it was, yeah. Even then, even after the first 3 or 4, I was still like,
Yeah, didn't believe
where's like, cause yeah, you're too close to it. You're too deep into it. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it was
Mhm.
just awesome seeing everyone. When we did announce the game, we had snacks in the studio, and everyone was hanging out and just watching the Game Awards, waiting for our trailer that we've seen so many times to drop to see it live in front of all these people, and then everybody
Yeah.
got to their desks and started refreshing, seeing okay, has the review come out yet? Has the review come out yet? And every time there was, everyone would kind of gather and. Yeah, we definitely didn't believe the
Like read some
initial
codes and yeah.
we really thought like something went horribly wrong somewhere, but we took
Yeah.
it, and it was just great seeing like the whole company come together and then really see like, hey, we did this together. It wasn't just a one person thing. It really was a team effort, and yeah, the team
Yeah.
killed it.
That's cool. That's encouraging to hear because I think that obviously this is changing to some degree in the industry as more awareness is as there's more awareness of some of the poor and unreasonable working conditions that a lot of studios kind of expect of their employees. It sounds like you guys managed to make a great game in a way that was like respectful of the people who were helping make it, and make it in a way that those people felt like a real sense of accomplishment about it. Like there was a real effort to work hard on it in a way that wasn't like
Unhealthy.
like soul crushing and unhealthy.
Yeah.
Which is encouraging to hear.
Yeah, I think I guess it's a big ask to work at A44, not in terms of work hours or conditions that other studios might suffer from, but more in terms of like really, like Derek said, like when you come in, like you'd want to kill it, and everybody puts everything they know, everything they can possibly do into this game to make it as good as it can be, and then the only thing we do to take care of our staff is make sure they have that platform to do that, and that they're taken care of. Because if your developers don't want to come in putting in those hours anymore, to the like spending their time at work should be productive, then I mean, if they burn out, then there's no creativity anymore. So
Yeah.
And we're well aware of that. So I mean, we realize it's hard work, but we again take care. You need to take care of your people if you want to pull something like this off, and so that's something we're just very wary of, and that kind of leads into the working conditions having to be like strictly good working.
Yeah.
Yeah, and but that's not to say that it's like all this fun and games. You come in and you clock out at the end of the day. It's really when you're here, you're really like putting every bit of your soul into this game.
Yeah.
So that you're right. I mean, that's why the team was so incredibly satisfied afterwards, because it wasn't a project that required them to never see their family or anything like that. It was a really fun project to work on. Although it was very challenging, especially
right
first game for a big studio, and I think I mean, we take pride in that's why our developers are so good, and that's why
you should
we want more people like our developers to join us.
And maybe it's just the quality of the game, or maybe it's that everybody had a lot of fun making it. But I'm curious, like, can you pinpoint like something that, like, how did you, is there one or two things that you did to create that culture where people come to work and are like, I want to kill it today. Like, I want to work really hard.
We're asking for a friend.
All right.
We did karaoke once.
That's the key.
We have this thing which we even say honestly in interviews, like I warn people about it. It's kind of exactly what Mike's breaking apart there. Is I literally say to them, like, you're not gonna be doing like crazy crunch hours here, you know, like that's not really what we do. But we're gonna to an unreasonable degree, people around you are gonna want you to be like hyper engaged. Like, and that's not even something like, it's not like there's a lead like cracking the whip or anything. It's like the developer next to you is gonna want to ask you things about things and is gonna be super excited about the stuff and want to engage with you. So just like if you have any inclination to wanting to like clock in, put your headphones on, just do what you got to do and clock out, like it's probably not the place for you, because you've got I guess everybody is passionate about it. Like they want to do it, like actively they're hyper engaged, and it's almost like you can't kind of stop that culture. And like I just try to warn them about that, I guess, that some people look at it and they're like, that's exactly what I want. Like I want to be world class at what I do. I want to learn as much as I can from the people around me, and that's like a benefit. But for other folks, like one person's heaven is another person's hell in some cases, you know, and some people I just want to sit down, I want to do my thing, I'm going to do a good job every day, but I'm just going to do my thing, and then I'm going to head off home, and like I don't really want to talk to anybody, or if I do it like, at lunch about like the game or something, you know. But like, and if that's the case, like they'll find it quite challenging to not have that. But so I mean, because of that, the folks who join us generally know what they're getting into, and that's what it is.
In my previous job, I shared an office with two different people. So it was like, well, the first I shared an office with another guy, and I'm very much like an outward processor, you know, like I need to like talk things over with people, or like ask questions, or just bounce ideas and stuff. And he very much was not, and got super annoyed until the point of like, I needed to move. And so then I went to a different office and shared with another person, and the same thing happened. And then he asked to be moved, until I was just kind of in my own office sitting with my own thoughts and stuff. But I love that idea of like, and I think you're acknowledging this. Like there's some people that just don't work that way, and that's cool. You know, find a place that caters to that. But I think that's a really cool. I'll send in my application.
I mean, like, and in all honesty, we have folks who kind of probably do like they spend most of their day just doing their thing, but it's more that at these crucial like moments, like people are going to want to engage you, and they're going to engage you about like things that you didn't expect that they're going to want to know about, or if you commit something and someone else like looks at it and thinks they can do it better, like they're either gonna like come to you and like talk to you about it and figure out why, or they're gonna just like do it themselves, because there's that sense of pride in the project, I guess. And, like
Yeah.
it's like if you share the perspective, then it's really good because it kind of helps things out, and it really does cater for like a whole bunch of personality types. It's just a perspective, I guess, and like a goal.
Yeah, it's really like we give a lot of, I guess, ownership over the things that the developers and the designers and the artists and everybody's making, and there's a lot of kind of like it's not that that you own one piece of the puzzle that no one else gets involved there, and I think that's kind of what we mean in terms of like, okay, you get to do all these great things, but it's very collaborative. Everybody wants to know what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just really that engagement. Like when you head home at 5, you're going to be tired. Your brain's going to be tired. And so, and I mean, that's what I think makes a great studio. People who are that engaged.
Yeah, and that's a good feeling when it's shared with other people, like when you're working on something together and you feel like, hey, we're both really into this and we both are really invested in it, and you leave home tired, but it's like you're tired because you did something.
It's a good tired.
That was worthwhile.
I definitely like walking around the studio and like you kind of know you can talk to anybody about what they're doing or what you're doing, and they're going to be very engaged, which is interesting now that I think about it.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, we've got people that have like the real niche skills that they are just so specialized in and so knowledgeable, and they always want to talk about it as well. That's why our meetings generally go way too long, because people are too engaged.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I think like it's kind of like you guys are the size of studio where it's it's not like it's obviously not like a tiny indie studio, but it's not like a massive AAA thing either. But I think the bigger your studio gets, the more temptation there is to like kind of just like hire someone to do a thing, but it sounds like you guys have created a culture where like people feel like they can speak into just about anything that you're doing, and they can say, hey, I've got an idea about how we could make this better, and there's like an openness to hear people out and stuff, which I think
I mean that's like our
cool
perspective at the moment, and it's very like it's a very tight culture, I guess you could say. It's an interesting thing. This is like, I guess, nothing to do with us, but I might as well go on about it anyway. Is like there's kind of a theory in business growth, I suppose, is that I suppose you can call it like culture hiring in general, and like building a team according to like a specific culture. So say in our case, people who want to be like hyper engaged and like absolutely kill it every time they come in, and like finding those folks is good when you're, say, your team is like 0 to 100, I guess. But once you go over a certain size, apparently that stuff starts to inhibit growth within your company, because you start to get, I guess, the echo chamber. Everyone's got too much of a similar perspective, where apparently there's a point in companies where you need to essentially like split into little mini companies, and each of those start culture hiring of their own, I guess you could say, and where on purpose it's like you have different cultures and almost competing views within your company is actually a valuable thing. I don't know that we're necessarily there yet, but it's kind of like an interesting perspective on how companies grow, and how you always make sure that you can challenge the status quo, or like what things are, and like continue evolving, where when you're at a certain size you can do that with your people, and then when you get too big it becomes like something that makes your company stagnate if you keep it around too much. So it's this interesting kind of fluid dynamic where I think if we got bigger we'd have to change to some degree as well.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Well, I've enjoyed hearing about your studio. It sounds like you've managed to you've managed to hit a nice balance there, and I certainly loved Ashen, so I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you guys. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, obviously the game's only been out for a couple of months. You're probably still catching your breath and stuff, but anything you can tell us about what's next for you guys? You guys have plans for another game?
It's going to be an exciting year. I can say that for sure. We're not going to be too quiet this year. I can't say what any of it is though.
It's exciting. I'll say walking through the studio is incredibly exciting.
Nice. That's cool.
Yeah.
Well,
because they just delivered the new shipment of PS4s that they can start testing Ashen on, I think.
Yeah.
Well,
if you want to go ahead and announce what the new project is, we can hold this episode until it comes. No, I'm kidding. This was I really enjoyed chatting with you all, and we definitely encourage people to go play Ashen. It's available on PC and also on Xbox One, and Chris is going to be fasting and praying until it comes out on some other platforms. So
Candlelight vigils as well.
Just join Chris in his candlelight vigils if you want to play this on another
live
platform.
Stream on Twitch, 24-hour candlelight vigil.
That's right. So where can people follow you guys? Obviously, you can look up your work online, but you guys on Twitter or anything else you'd mention?
Yeah, I mean, you can always check out our website, which links to everything at a44games.com. We're most active probably on Twitter and Instagram, I'd say. It's probably the best places to find us.
Yeah, if you just search A44 Games on both of them, you'll find us.
Yep, exactly.
Great. Cool. Well, I would also encourage people to go check out Annapurna's lineup too. Annapurna published Ashen, and everything Annapurna puts out is just super unique and interesting. So I'm always keeping my eyes peeled for what's next with your publisher. So what was it like working with Annapurna? It just seems like such a cool publisher.
Yeah, absolutely. Like they were also really engaged on like the design end of things. Getting their feedback on stuff was amazing. So yeah, that's been great.
That's cool. Great. Cool, man. Well, I guess that's it for us. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm DrewDixon82. Chris is not on Twitter. Well, he is, but he doesn't use it. So
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, don't.
I keep telling myself I'll do it, and then I don't.
You can follow Love Thy Nerd on all the social medias. Just search for Love Thy Nerd. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Just search for that. You'll find it. We have a great community of nerds. It's called Love Thy Nerd Community. Just search for Love Thy Nerd Community on Facebook if you want to join our community. You can get on there and nerd out about nerd stuff with all your nerd friends. It'll be great. And we have a great website, lovethynerd.com, with all kinds of great articles, podcasts. We have a podcast network. So this is one of 3 podcasts that Love Thy Nerd puts out. We also have Free Play, which gets into all areas of nerd culture, and is just really entertaining, really fun podcast to listen to. We also have a comic book podcast called The Pull List that's definitely worthy of your time as well. That's it for us. Thanks so much for listening. Please go rate and review us on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you do podcasts. And tell your friends and family about this podcast. And if you rate and review our podcast, we may be able to get you a free game or something. Just let me know. If you have questions about this podcast or questions you want us to ask designers on this podcast, or you want to talk anything about Love Thy Nerd, just email me or Chris. Just our first names at lovethynerd.com. That's it. Thanks again, Derek and Mike. This was a lot of fun.
It was tons of fun. Thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you very much.